No one would touch the plague orphans until one human doctor kissed their foreheads. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The quarantine ward on Station Viridian smelled of antiseptic and despair, a combination that had become all too familiar to Dr. Sarah Morgan over the past 3 months. Through the transparent barrier that separated the infected from the rest of the station, she could see them, the orphans. 47 children of various species, all victims of the scarlet wasting, all abandoned by families too terrified to even look at them through protective glass. No delegation from any of the 7 species represented among the sick had visited in weeks. The galaxy had already written these children off as dead. Sarah pressed her palm against the cool surface of the barrier and watched as a small Torvian child, no more than 5 cycles old, coughed weakly in the corner. The girl's normally violet skin had taken on an ashen gray tone, the telltale sign of the plague's progression. Beside her, a young Keltheran boy barely 10 cycles old tried to comfort her, his 4 arms trembling as he offered her a cup of water. The disease had already claimed his parents and 2 siblings. Now he waited for his own turn, trying to bring comfort to others even younger than himself. The scarlet wasting had appeared 8 months ago on the mining colony of Theta 9, a virus unlike anything the Galactic Medical Council had encountered before. It spread through touch, through breath, through any form of close contact. The mortality rate stood at 98%. There was no cure, no treatment beyond managing symptoms. The infected were quarantined, isolated, and left to die. That was protocol. That was mercy, according to most species. Quick separation meant the plague could be contained. The sick would die regardless, so why risk more lives with futile care? Sarah had arrived at Station Viridian 3 months earlier as part of a human medical exchange program. She had expected to study advanced alien healing techniques, to learn from species with millennia more experience than humanity. Instead, she found herself assigned to the quarantine ward, the posting no one else wanted. The Galactic Medical Council had been polite but clear. Humans were new to the galactic community, barely a century since first contact. They could handle the undesirable assignments. What they had not expected was that Sarah would actually enter the quarantine zone. The station's chief medical officer, a distinguished Zentari physician named Velker, had nearly collapsed when Sarah first announced her intention. His scaled face had turned 3 shades paler as he explained, in painstaking detail, exactly how many protocols she would be violating, how many regulations she would break, and how certain her death would be. Sarah had listened patiently, then asked him a simple question. Who was caring for the children inside? Velker had blinked his 3 eyes in confusion. Care was being provided remotely. Automated systems delivered food, water, and medication. Drones monitored vital signs. The children were being kept as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. But who holds them when they cry? Sarah had pressed. Who sits with them when they are afraid? Who tells them they are not alone? The chief medical officer had stared at her as if she had spoken in an unknown language. The children are dying, he had said slowly. Physical comfort is irrelevant. We cannot risk the infection spreading. Sarah had thanked him for his input and entered the quarantine zone anyway. That had been 11 weeks ago. Since then, she had become the only living soul willing to touch the untouchables, to sit with the condemned, to offer the comfort that every other species had deemed an unacceptable risk. She moved through the ward now, her footsteps echoing on the sterile floor. The children knew her routine. It was early morning on station time, which meant she would start with the youngest and work her way through each bed, checking vitals, administering medication, offering food and water. But more than that, she would talk to them. She would listen to their stories, learn their names, remember their faces. She would hold their hands and brush their hair and tell them they mattered. At the first bed, a tiny Muradin child named Pip lay curled under a thin blanket. His species was small and furry, resembling what humans might call a cross between a mouse and a rabbit. Pip's family had left him at the quarantine ward 6 weeks earlier, setting him down at the entrance and walking away without a backward glance. He had cried for 3 days straight before finally falling silent. Sarah had spent those 3 days holding him, rocking him, singing soft earth lullabies that he could not understand but seemed to find soothing nonetheless. Good morning, Pip, Sarah said softly, kneeling beside his bed. She reached out and gently stroked his forehead with her fingertips. His fever had broken during the night, a small miracle. How are you feeling today? Pip's large eyes opened slowly. His whiskers twitched. Tired, Dr. Sarah, he whispered in the common tongue. But the pain is less. That is wonderful news, Sarah replied, genuine warmth in her voice. She pulled out her medical scanner and ran it over him, checking his readings. His infection markers were still dangerously high, but they had stabilized. He was not getting worse. In the world of the scarlet wasting, that counted as a victory. Let me get you some breakfast. Do you think you can eat something today? Pip nodded weakly. Sarah stood and walked to the nearby dispenser, retrieving a bowl of nutrient paste specially formulated for Muradin physiology. She returned to his bedside and helped him sit up, supporting his small body with one arm, while she fed him small spoonfuls with the other. He managed half the bowl before exhaustion claimed him again. You did well, Sarah told him, lowering him gently back onto the pillow. Rest now. I will check on you again soon. She moved to the next bed, then the next, repeating the process with each child. There was Kessa, a Torvian girl of 7 cycles who loved to draw and covered her walls with pictures of her home world. There was Thorn, a young Keltheran boy who dreamed of becoming a star pilot like his father had been. There was Mira and Ven, Zentari twins who finished each other's sentences and refused to sleep in separate beds. There was Jax, a teenage human boy who had contracted the plague on Theta 9 and whose own parents had placed him in quarantine before fleeing the station. Sarah spent extra time with Jax. The boy was 16, angry, frightened, and utterly alone. His parents had not even said goodbye, had not even looked at him through the barrier. They had simply transferred his custody to the Galactic Medical Council and booked passage on the first ship leaving the sector. They were afraid, Sarah told him gently as she checked his foreline. Fear makes people do terrible things. They were cowards, Jack spat, his face flushed with fever and fury. They threw me away like garbage. You are the only one who even pretends to care, and you are not even my real doctor. You are just the one they stuck with the death ward because you are human and expendable. Sarah sat down on the edge of his bed and took his hand in hers. I am here because I choose to be here, she said firmly. Not because anyone made me. Not because I am expendable. I am here because you and every other child in this ward deserves to have someone who cares whether you live or die. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. The scarlet wasting may take many things from you, Jax, but it will not take your worth as a person. Not while I am here. Jax's anger crumbled, replaced by tears that he tried desperately to hide. Sarah did not look away. She held his hand and let him cry, offering silent comfort until the storm passed. By midday, she had made her rounds through the entire ward. She had checked every child, administered every medication, changed every bedding that needed changing. She had told stories and sung songs, and played simple games with those well enough to participate. She had held hands and wiped tears and promised that they were not forgotten. Now she sat in the small office attached to the ward, updating medical records and filing reports that she knew no one would read. The Galactic Medical Council had made it clear that the quarantine ward was a containment measure, not a treatment facility. They wanted documentation of the plague's progression for research purposes, but they had no interest in individual patient outcomes. The children were already classified as terminal cases. Sarah's terminal was chimed with an incoming message. She opened it to find a transmission from Dr. Velker. The message was terse and official. She was required to attend a council meeting in 2 hours. Attendance was mandatory. Sarah sighed and rubbed her tired eyes. She had been working 16-hour days for weeks, catching sleep in brief stretches on a cot in the office. The council meetings were always the same. She would present her reports. The council members would express polite concern while carefully maintaining physical distance from her, and then they would remind her that her work was appreciated but ultimately futile. The children would die. That was inevitable. She was wasting resources and risking cross-contamination for no meaningful gain. She had stopped trying to make them understand weeks ago. 2 hours later, Sarah stood in the council chamber, a circular room with seats arranged in ascending tiers. The 7 species of the Galactic Medical Council were represented: Zentari, Torvian, Keltheran, Muradin, Vexian, Cordith, and human. The human representative, Dr. Marcus Dean, was a distinguished older man who had made it abundantly clear that he found Sarah's behavior embarrassing to their species' reputation. Dr. Morgan, began Counselor Velker from his elevated seat, we have reviewed your latest reports from the quarantine ward. Your dedication is noted, but we must address some concerning patterns in your behavior. Sarah stood at the center of the chamber, hands clasped behind her back. What patterns would those be, Counselor? A Torvian counselor, her skin a deep purple that indicated advanced age, leaned forward. You continue to engage in direct physical contact with infected patients despite repeated warnings about contamination risks. You have been observed holding patients, touching them without protective barriers, even placing your face in close proximity to theirs. This is reckless behavior that puts not only yourself but the entire station at risk. I wear full protective gear during every shift, Sarah replied calmly. I follow decontamination protocols precisely. I have been tested daily for signs of infection and have shown no symptoms. My behavior poses no risk to the station. You cannot know that, interjected a Keltheran counselor, his forearms gesturing emphatically. The scarlet wasting is unpredictable. You may be asymptomatic. You may be building viral load even now. Your insistence on physical contact with the infected is medically unsound and emotionally irrational. Is it irrational to provide comfort to dying children? Sarah asked, her voice level but carrying an edge. Is it medically unsound to reduce their psychological suffering? It is pointless, stated a Vexian counselor flatly. The children will die regardless of your efforts. Your time and resources would be better spent on research that might prevent future outbreaks, not on emotional gestures that serve no clinical purpose. Sarah felt the familiar frustration rising in her chest. She had had this conversation a dozen times before. These beings, these supposedly advanced civilizations, could not seem to grasp the concept that care and compassion had value beyond clinical outcomes. With respect, counselors, I disagree fundamentally with your assessment. The children in my care are not simply data points or research subjects. They are living, feeling beings who deserve dignity and compassion in their final days. If we abandon them to die alone and afraid, we are not practicing medicine. We are practicing cruelty disguised as pragmatism. The human counselor, Dr. Dean, spoke up for the first time, his voice heavy with disapproval. Dr. Morgan, you are making the rest of humanity look foolish. The galaxy is watching how we integrate into the galactic community. Your emotional display is reinforcing every stereotype about humans being irrationally sentimental and unable to make hard but necessary decisions. Sarah turned to face him directly. If caring about children makes humanity look foolish, then I am proud to be a fool, and I would rather be judged as sentimental than as cold-hearted. The chamber fell silent. The counselors exchanged glances, a ripple of discomfort passing through the assembled beings. Dr. Morgan, Velker said finally, his tone slightly softer. No one questions your compassion, but you must understand the reality of the situation. The scarlet wasting has no cure. These children are going to die. Forming emotional attachments to them only causes you unnecessary pain. Providing physical comfort serves no medical purpose and exposes you to unacceptable risk. We are asking you to step back, to let the automated systems handle basic care while you focus on research. Help us understand this disease so we can prevent future outbreaks. That is where a physician's energy should be directed. Sarah took a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. I understand your perspective, counselors. I truly do. But I cannot accept it. You are asking me to value potential future lives over the actual lives in my care right now. You are asking me to treat dying children as acceptable losses in service of a greater good. I became a doctor to save lives when possible and to ease suffering when saving is not possible. Every child in that ward is suffering. I can ease that suffering. I will continue to do so, regardless of your opinions on the matter. This is not a request, Dr. Morgan, the Torvian counselor said sharply. This is a directive from the Galactic Medical Council. You will reduce physical contact with infected patients to emergency situations only. You will redirect your efforts toward research. You will comply with standard quarantine protocols. These are not suggestions. And if I refuse? Sarah asked quietly. Then you will be removed from your posting and barred from the medical facility, Dr. Dean answered. Your presence here is contingent on your cooperation with council directives. Sarah stood silent for a long moment, feeling the weight of their stares. She thought of Pip, so small and frightened, needing someone to hold him through the nightmares. She thought of Jax, angry and abandoned, needing someone to remind him that he mattered. She thought of all 47 children, each one precious, each one deserving of love in their final days. Then I suppose you will have to remove me, Sarah said calmly, because I will not abandon those children. I will not let them die alone. That is not negotiable. The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, counselors speaking over each other in various languages. Belker raised his hand for silence. Dr. Morgan, he said, his 3 eyes regarding her with what might have been pity. You are throwing away your career, possibly your life, for a symbolic gesture. These children cannot be saved. Your sacrifice changes nothing. It changes everything for them, Sarah replied. And that is enough. She was escorted from the chamber by security, her access to the medical facility suspended pending a formal review. They allowed her to return to the quarantine ward one final time to collect her personal belongings, under strict supervision. When she entered the ward, the children sensed immediately that something was wrong. Those well enough to move gathered around her, their eyes wide with fear. Are you leaving us? Kessa asked in a small voice. Are you going away like everyone else? Sarah knelt down, so she was at eye level with the Torvian girl. She reached out and took Kessa's small hands in hers, then looked around at all the frightened faces watching her. I do not want to leave, she told them honestly. But the council says I have to. They say I am breaking rules by caring for you the way I do. They want me to stay away, to let machines take care of you instead. But machines do not hug us, Pip said, his voice breaking. Machines do not tell us stories. Machines do not say we matter. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes, but forced them back. You do matter. Each and every one of you matters so much. I wish I could make the council understand that. I wish I could make them see what I see when I look at you. Why do they not understand? Thorn asked, confusion plain on his young face. Why do they not care that we are afraid? Because they are afraid too, Sarah explained gently. They are afraid of the sickness. They are afraid of dying. They are afraid of feeling the pain of losing you. So they tell themselves that not caring is the smart thing, the logical thing. They tell themselves that keeping their distance is proper and professional. But sometimes, the smart thing and the right thing are not the same. What will happen to us now? Mira asked, one of the Zentari twins. Her sister Vin clutched her hand tightly. The machines will bring you food and medicine, Sarah said. The doctors will watch your vital signs from outside. You will be taken care of, medically speaking. But we will be alone, Jack said flatly. Like before you came. Sarah could not deny it. Yes. I am so sorry. The security officer cleared his throat impatiently. Dr. Morgan, your time is up. You need to leave now. Sarah stood slowly. She looked at each child in turn, memorizing their faces. Then, before the security officer could stop her, she moved to Pip and knelt beside him. The tiny Muradin child looked up at her with huge, tear-filled eyes. Sarah reached out and gently placed her hand on his forehead, her palm covering his small skull with infinite tenderness. Then she leaned down and pressed her lips to his brow in a soft, gentle kiss. The security officer made a strangled sound of shock, but Sarah ignored him. She moved to Kessa and did the same, kissing the young Torvian girl's forehead with the same tender care. Then Thorn, then Mira and Vin, then every single child in the ward. She went to each bed, each scared face, and offered the same gesture of love and farewell. A kiss on the forehead, a touch that said you are worthy of affection, you are deserving of love, you are not forgotten. When she reached Jax, the teenage boy was openly crying. Sarah sat on the edge of his bed and pulled him into a hug, holding him tight while his shoulders shook with sobs. You matter, she whispered into his ear. You have always mattered. Do not let anyone tell you different. Do not let this disease or your parents' fear or the council's indifference convince you that you are disposable. You are precious. You are loved. Jax clung to her, like she was the last solid thing in a collapsing world. Thank you, he choked out. Thank you for seeing us. The security officer, clearly uncomfortable with the display, grabbed Sarah's arm. Enough. You are contaminated now anyway. Let us go. Sarah allowed herself to be led away, But she looked back over her shoulder at the children gathering at the barrier, their small hands pressed against the glass. She placed her own hand against the barrier from the other side, a final connection before she was pulled away. They took her directly to a separate quarantine room, a sterile box with a bed, a toilet, and nothing else. She would be monitored for signs of infection. If she developed symptoms, she would be moved to the main quarantine ward to die with the children she had kissed. If she remained symptom-free for 30 days, she would be released and deported back to Earth, her medical license revoked. Sarah sat on the narrow bed and waited. She had no regrets. If she died from the scarlet wasting, at least she would die knowing she had done the right thing. She had given those children what every living being deserved, proof that they were loved. The hours passed slowly. Sarah was not permitted any personal items, no books, no devices, nothing to distract from the monotony. She slept fitfully, ate the bland food delivered by drone, and watched the time tick by on the digital display mounted on the wall. On the third day of her isolation, something changed. Sarah woke from an uneasy sleep to find Dr. Velker standing outside her containment cell, his scaled face unreadable. He gestured for her to approach the transparent barrier. Dr. Morgan, he began without preamble, something unexpected has occurred in the quarantine ward. Sarah's heart clenched. What happened? Are the children all right? Velker's 3 eyes blinked in what might have been confusion. That is the unexpected part. They are not just all right. They are improving. Sarah's breath caught. What? 3 days ago, you had physical contact with every patient in the ward. You kissed each child on the forehead. Since then, we have observed measurable improvement in 43 of the 47 patients. Fever reduction, decreased inflammation markers, improved immune response. For patients are showing signs of complete viral clearance. That is impossible, Sarah whispered. The scarlet wasting has a 98% mortality rate. Had, Velker corrected. We do not know what it has now. We are running comprehensive tests, but the correlation is undeniable. The children you had contact with are recovering at a rate we have never seen before. Sarah's mind raced. It makes no sense. I did not administer any new treatments. I did not give them anything except comfort. Velker stared at her in silence for a long moment. Dr. Morgan, we need to run tests on you. Extensive tests. Something in your biology, your chemistry, something interacted with the virus in a way we do not understand. We need to know what it is. Over the next week, Sarah was subjected to every medical test the Galactic Medical Council could devise. They took samples of her blood, her saliva, her skin cells. They analyzed her DNA, her immune markers, her microbial flora. They scanned her with equipment she had never seen before, devices that hummed and clicked and bathed her in lights of colors that did not exist in the human visible spectrum. And in the quarantine ward, the impossible continued to happen. By day 5, 31 children showed significant improvement. By day 7, 15 were in full remission, their bodies completely clear of the virus. The medical staff watched in stunned disbelief as patients who had been on the edge of death began to laugh, to play, to ask for second helpings at meals. The council reconvened in emergency session. Sarah was brought before them again, this time not as a defendant, but as a phenomenon they desperately needed to understand. Dr. Morgan, began the Vexian counselor, we have completed our analysis of your biological samples. The results are extraordinary. Sarah sat in the center of the chamber, exhausted from the constant testing, but alert. What did you find? Your saliva contains a unique combination of enzymes and proteins that, when introduced to the scarlet wasting virus, trigger a cascade effect in the viral RNA structure. In simple terms, your saliva dismantles the virus at a molecular level. But the delivery method seems to matter. Simple contact is not sufficient. The proteins need to be introduced in specific concentration and manner. Sarah's eyes widened. The kisses. Yes, confirmed a Keltheran researcher who had joined the council session. When you kissed the children on their foreheads, you transferred trace amounts of saliva to their skin. Their elevated body temperature from fever caused the saliva to absorb through pores directly into their bloodstream at the capillary level. The concentration was perfect, not too much, not too little. And the location mattered. The forehead has high blood flow to the brain. The antiviral proteins reached the central nervous system before the virus could establish its final foothold. A Torvian medical officer spoke up, her voice tinged with awe. We have isolated the specific proteins responsible. We are already synthesizing them in the laboratory. Within weeks, we can have enough to treat every scarlet wasting patient in the galaxy. You have done what the entire Galactic Medical Council could not, Dr. Morgan. You found the cure. Sarah sat in stunned silence, trying to process what she was hearing. I did not find anything. I just kissed sick children because I love them. Perhaps that is precisely the point, Velker said quietly. Every species on this council, we approach the scarlet wasting as a problem to be solved through analysis, through distance, through controlled observation. We never considered that the solution might require proximity, might require physical contact, might require the very thing we were all too afraid to offer. The human counselor, Dr. Dean, looked deeply uncomfortable. Dr. Morgan, on behalf of the human delegation, I must apologize. I questioned your methods. I called you foolish. I see now that I was the foolish one. Sarah shook her head. You were not foolish. You were afraid. Everyone was afraid. I was afraid too. But those children needed someone to love them more than they needed someone to keep them at a safe distance. The chamber fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the assembled counselors. Dr. Morgan, Velker said formally, the Galactic Medical Council would like to offer you a position as Chief of Pediatric Infectious Disease. Your methods, while unorthodox, have proven effective in ways we could not have imagined. We would be honored to have you lead our efforts in compassionate care integration. Sarah considered the offer. It was everything she could have wanted: vindication, respect, the opportunity to change how the galaxy approached medical care. But something in her hesitated. I appreciate the offer, Counselor, she said slowly. But before I accept any position, I need to return to the quarantine ward. There are still children there who need care, who need to know they have not been abandoned again. Of course, Velker agreed immediately. You have full access restored. But Dr. Morgan, you should know, the children have been asking for you constantly. They have been asking when you are coming back. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. Then I should not keep them waiting. She stood and left the council chamber, making her way through the station corridors with purpose. When she reached the quarantine ward, she found the barriers had been partially lifted. Medical staff moved in and out with careful protocol, but without the absolute separation that had defined the space before. Inside, the transformation was remarkable. Children who had been bedridden were sitting up, talking, even walking around. The gray pallor of disease had been replaced by healthier skin tones across multiple species. Laughter, actual laughter, echoed through the ward. And then they saw her. Dr. Sarah. Pip's high voice cut through the noise. She is back. Dr. Sarah is back. Suddenly Sarah was surrounded by children, all of them trying to hug her at once. She knelt down and opened her arms, letting them pile on, a tangle of small bodies and relieved tears. She held them and let herself cry openly now, crying for the fear they had all endured, for the abandonment they had suffered, for the miracle of their survival. When the initial reunion calmed, Sarah pulled back to look at them properly. The improvement was even more dramatic up close. Eyes that had been dull with fever now sparkled with life. Skin that had been ashen glowed with returning health. They were not fully recovered yet, but they were undeniably healing. We heard you saved us, Kessa said, her voice full of wonder. We heard that your kisses cured the plague. Sarah smiled and brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. Love cured the plague. I just delivered it. Is it true you are in trouble because you cared about us? Thorne asked, concern creasing his young face. I was, Sarah admitted. But not anymore. It turns out that sometimes breaking the rules is exactly the right thing to do. Will you stay with us? Mira and Vin asked in unison, their voices overlapping in that way twins often did. For as long as you need me, Sarah promised. I am not going anywhere. Jax hung back from the crowd of younger children, but Sarah could see the emotion on his face. She stood and walked over to him, meeting his eyes. You came back, he said, voice rough. I did not think you would be able to. I told you that you matter, Sarah replied. I meant it. All of you matter. I was not going to let some council tell me otherwise. My parents contacted the station, Jax said quietly. They heard about the cure. They said they want me back now that I am not contagious anymore. How do you feel about that? Sarah asked carefully. Jax's jaw tightened. I feel like they threw me away when things got hard, and now they want me back, because it is convenient. I do not know if I can forgive that. You do not have to decide right now, Sarah told him gently. You have time to heal, physically and emotionally. Whatever you decide, I will support you. Jax nodded slowly, then surprised Sarah by stepping forward and hugging her tightly. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for being brave when everyone else was afraid. Over the following weeks, the quarantine ward transformed from a house of death into a recovery center. The synthesized cure, developed from Sarah's saliva proteins, was distributed to every scarlet wasting patient in the galaxy. The mortality rate plummeted from 98% to less than 5%. Thousands of lives were saved. But more importantly, the culture began to shift. The story of the human doctor who kissed plague orphans spread across the galactic network. It became a phenomenon that medical ethicists and cultural anthropologists studied intensely. Why had a human succeeded where more advanced species failed? The answer, they discovered, lay in a fundamental difference in approach. Most galactic species had evolved with strong survival instincts that prioritized collective safety over individual welfare. When faced with a contagious plague, their first instinct was isolation, separation, elimination of risk. It was logical, efficient, and had served them well for millennia. Humans, it turned out, had evolved differently. Earth's history was marked by close family bonds, by tribes that cared for their sick and elderly, by social structures that valued individual lives even at cost to the group. Humans had a strange tendency to run toward danger when someone they loved was threatened, to sacrifice their own safety for the welfare of others. It was illogical by most galactic standards. It was also, apparently, exactly what was needed to solve problems that pure logic could not touch. Sarah found herself at the center of a medical revolution. She was invited to speak at conferences across the galaxy, to teach seminars on compassionate care, to consult on cases where traditional approaches had failed. She always accepted, but she always made sure to return to Station Viridian, to the children who had become her family. The 47 orphans of the original quarantine ward became known across the galaxy as the Touched Ones, children who had survived the unsurvivable through the power of human compassion. As they recovered, their families began to return. Some reunions were joyful, parents weeping with gratitude for children they thought lost. Others were complicated, children like Jax who had to navigate forgiveness for abandonment. Sarah was there for all of them, helping families heal emotional wounds as well as physical ones. 6 months after the cure was distributed, a ceremony was held on Station Viridian. The Galactic Medical Council had commissioned a memorial to honor those who died in the early days of the scarlet wasting before the cure was found. More than 3,000 names were etched into a crystalline wall that caught and refracted light into rainbow patterns. Sarah stood before the memorial with all 47 of her children, as she had come to think of them. They had all survived, every single one. But they stood silent in respect for those who had not been so lucky, for the thousands who died alone and afraid before anyone understood that love could be medicine. Dr. Morgan, Velker approached her as the ceremony concluded. I wanted to thank you personally. You changed not just galactic medicine, but galactic culture. We are learning to value compassion alongside logic, connection alongside safety. It is an uncomfortable shift for many species, but it is necessary. Sarah smiled at the Zentari doctor who had once tried so hard to keep her away from the children. You were not wrong to be cautious, counselor. Fear is natural, but love is stronger than fear. That is what I learned from these children. They were surrounded by death and abandonment, but they still chose to care for each other, to comfort each other. They taught me that compassion is not a weakness. It is the most powerful medicine we have. The human species continues to surprise us, Velker admitted. You think differently, feel differently, approach problems from angles we never consider. It is valuable. We are fortunate to have you among us. I am fortunate to be here, Sarah replied. This experience changed me. Those children changed me. I came to the stars thinking I would learn advanced science and exotic techniques. Instead, I learned that the most important thing I can offer as a doctor is not my knowledge or my skills. It is my humanity. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah felt small hands slipping into hers. She looked down to find Pip on one side and Kessa on the other, both looking up at her with adoring eyes. Can we go get ice cream? Pip asked hopefully. The cafeteria has that Terran chocolate flavor you like. Sarah laughed. Ice cream sounds perfect. Let us gather everyone and make it a party. Within minutes, all 47 children were assembled, chattering excitedly about their favorite flavors and planning who would sit with whom. Sarah herded them toward the cafeteria, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the station's environmental controls. This was what healing looked like, not just bodies free from disease, but hearts learning to trust again, souls remembering how to hope. These children had been written off as lost causes, as acceptable casualties in the fight against the plague. Now they were thriving, laughing, planning futures they thought they would never have. And it had all started with something so simple. A kiss on the forehead. A gesture of love offered without expectation of reward or survival. Human instinct overriding human caution. In the cafeteria, Sarah sat surrounded by her unlikely family, children of 7 different species united by their survival and by the love of one human doctor who refused to let them die alone. They ate ice cream and told jokes and made plans for the future. They talked about what they would be when they grew up, where they would travel, what they would discover. Jax, who had decided to maintain limited contact with his parents but pursue emancipation as soon as he reached legal age, announced that he wanted to become a doctor. Like you, he told Sarah, I want to help people who everyone else has given up on. Me too, chorused several of the younger children. Sarah felt tears threatening again, but these were happy tears. You will all be amazing at whatever you choose to do. You have already survived the impossible. Everything else is just details. Later that evening, after the children were settled in their new residential wing, no longer quarantined but still together by choice, Sarah returned to her quarters. She sat at her desk and pulled up a blank transmission form. She had been meaning to send this message for weeks, but had not quite known what to say. Finally, she began typing, addressing the message to her family back on Earth. Dear Mom and Dad, she wrote, I know my last few messages have been brief and probably concerning. I want to tell you what has been happening here on Station Viridian. I want to tell you about the children I have been caring for, about the plague that almost killed them, about the miracle of their survival. But more than that, I want to thank you. You raised me to believe that every life has value. You taught me that love is not a luxury or a weakness, but a fundamental necessity. You showed me through your actions that doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing. Everything I did here, everything that led to saving thousands of lives, came from the foundation you gave me. I kissed dying children because you kissed me when I was sick as a child. I held frightened orphans because you held me when I was afraid. I refused to abandon vulnerable kids because you never abandoned me, even when I was difficult or disappointing or made choices you did not understand. The galaxy is calling me a hero. They are saying I changed medical history. But the truth is, I just loved some children the way you loved me. I just offered the kind of care that humans have been offering each other for thousands of years. I was not exceptional. I was just human. Thank you for teaching me how to be the kind of human who kisses foreheads and holds hands and refuses to let fear override compassion. Thank you for showing me that love is not just an emotion, but an action, a choice, a commitment to seeing the worth in every person. I miss you both terribly. I hope to visit Earth soon and introduce you to 47 remarkable children who taught me as much as I taught them. I think you would like them. I know they would love you. Your daughter, Sarah. She sent the message and sat back, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. The past months had been exhausting, terrifying, and ultimately triumphant. She had faced down a galactic council, violated countless protocols, and risked her own life. She had been called foolish, reckless, and emotionally unstable. She had also saved thousands of lives and proven that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or intelligence, but the simple, stubborn refusal to let people suffer alone. Her terminal chimed with a new message. It was from the Galactic Medical Council, officially offering her the position of Chief of Pediatric Infectious Disease, with full authority to implement compassionate care protocols across all council facilities. The salary was impressive, the benefits generous, the opportunity to change lives immeasurable. Sarah smiled and drafted her acceptance, but she included one non-negotiable condition. The 47 children from the quarantine ward would remain together as a family unit, with Sarah as their legal guardian, until each reached adulthood, and chose their own path. They had been abandoned once. She would not let it happen again. The council accepted her terms without hesitation. 3 years later, Dr. Sarah Morgan stood in the main auditorium of the Galactic Medical Academy, addressing a room full of new medical students representing dozens of species. It was orientation day, the beginning of their journey into medicine. "You will learn many things during your time at this academy," Sarah told the assembled students. "You will study anatomy and pharmacology, surgery and diagnostics. You will master technologies and techniques that can save lives in remarkable ways. All of this is important. All of this is necessary. But there is one lesson I need you to learn first, before anything else." She paused and gestured to the back of the auditorium. The doors opened and 47 young people entered, her children, now teenagers and young adults. They filed onto the stage beside Sarah, healthy and whole and absolutely radiant with life. 3 years ago, these individuals were dying, Sarah continued. The scarlet wasting had infected them. They had been abandoned by their families, isolated by medical protocol, and written off as terminal cases. The entire Galactic Medical Council had given up on them. Every expert agreed they could not be saved. But they survived anyway. Do you know why? She waited, but no one in the audience answered. They survived because someone loved them, Sarah said simply. They survived because one human doctor refused to accept that efficiency and safety were more important than compassion. They survived because sometimes the cure for what ails us is not a drug or a surgery or a technology. Sometimes the cure is human connection. Sometimes the cure is love. She turned to look at her children, and they smiled back at her with expressions of such affection and gratitude that her heart swelled. You will face cases in your career where the odds are impossible, where the smart choice is to give up, where logic tells you that further effort is futile. In those moments, I want you to remember these faces. I want you to remember that caring for patients is not just about treating their physical symptoms. It is about seeing them as whole people, about honoring their dignity, about refusing to let them suffer alone even when suffering seems inevitable. Pip, now a healthy 10-year-old Muradin with bright eyes and a quick smile, stepped forward. Dr. Sarah kissed my forehead when everyone else was afraid to touch me, he said in his high voice that nevertheless carried through the auditorium. She held me when I cried. She told me I mattered. And because of that, I am alive today. I am studying to be a teacher. I want to work with children who have been abandoned or neglected. Dr. Sarah showed me that one person choosing to care can change everything. Kessa came forward next, the Torvian girl who loved to draw. "I am going to art school," she announced. "I am going to create paintings that remind people of beauty even in dark times." Dr. Sarah taught me that hope is a choice. We can choose to give up, or we can choose to believe in impossible things. She chose to believe in us when no one else would. One by one, each of the 47 young people shared their stories, their dreams, their gratitude. Jax, now 19 and in his second year of medical school, spoke last. "My parents abandoned me when I got sick," he said, his voice steady and strong. "They were afraid, and fear made them choose their own safety over my life. I was angry for a long time. But Dr. Sarah taught me that their failure does not define my worth. She taught me that I am valuable because I exist, not because of what I can do or achieve. She taught me that being human, truly human, means choosing love even when love is terrifying." He turned to look at Sarah directly. "I am going to be a doctor because of you. I am going to specialize in infectious disease. And when I face patients that everyone else has given up on, I am going to remember the doctor who kissed plague orphans on the forehead and changed the galaxy." The auditorium erupted in applause. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, but she made no attempt to hide them. These children, these beautiful, resilient, impossible children, were her greatest achievement. Not the cure she had accidentally discovered, not the awards she had received, not the changes she had implemented in medical policy. Them, the lives she had touched, the love she had offered, the future she had helped make possible. After the presentation, students swarmed Sarah and her children with questions. They wanted to know about the scarlet wasting, about the cure, about compassionate care techniques. But more than that, they wanted to understand how to maintain hope in the face of impossible odds, how to care deeply without burning out, How to be the kind of doctor who changes lives rather than just treating symptoms. Sarah answered each question patiently, but she always brought the conversation back to the same central point. Medicine without compassion is just mechanics. You are not repairing machines. You are caring for living, feeling beings who need to know they are valued. Never forget that. As the crowd eventually dispersed, Sarah gathered her children around her. They had a tradition now. Every week they all gathered for a family meal, no matter how busy their individual schedules became. Tonight they would go to Sarah's residence, a spacious home on the academy grounds, and cook together, laugh together, be together. On the way, they passed the memorial wall, the same crystalline structure that had been relocated from Station Viridian to the academy grounds. The names of the 3,000 who died still glowed in the light, a reminder of what had been lost, but also what had been learned. Sarah paused, as she always did, and placed her hand on the cool surface. She thought of all the children who had not survived, all the families who had not been reunited, all the potential that had been lost to fear and isolation. Then she felt small hands slipping into hers. Pip on her left, Kessa on her right, and behind them, all 45 others forming a chain of connection. They stood together in silence, honoring the dead, celebrating the living, remembering that every life mattered. "Do you ever regret it?" Jax asked quietly. "Do you ever wish you had not entered the quarantine ward? You could have avoided all the danger, all the conflict with the council. You could have had a normal, safe career." Sarah smiled and squeezed his hand. "Not for 1 second. Every risk I took, every rule I broke, every moment of fear or uncertainty, it was all worth it to be standing here with all of you. You are my family. You are my legacy. You are proof that love is not just a nice idea or a comforting sentiment. Love is medicine. Love is power. Love is what makes us human." And that, she thought as they walked toward home together, was the lesson the galaxy needed to learn. Not that humans were exceptional or superior, but that humanity, true humanity, the choice to care about others even at cost to yourself, was a strength that transcended species, that crossed boundaries, that could cure plagues both physical and spiritual. No one would touch the plague orphans until one human doctor kissed their foreheads. But that single act of love had rippled outward, changing lives, changing cultures, changing the very definition of what it meant to practice medicine in a galactic society. 47 children lived because someone chose compassion over caution. Thousands more lived because those 47 inspired a revolution in care. And in the years to come, countless millions would benefit from the lesson learned in a quarantine ward on Station Viridian, that sometimes the most advanced medicine is also the most ancient. Sometimes the cure is as simple as a kiss, a touch, a promise that says you are not alone, you are not forgotten, you are loved. Sarah looked at her children, her impossible, beautiful, resilient children, and felt gratitude beyond words. They had taught her as much as she had taught them. They had shown her that hope could survive anything, that love could conquer even death, that humanity at its best was measured not by what we achieved, but by how we cared for the vulnerable among us. The galaxy had learned something from humanity that day, and humanity had learned something too, that their greatest gift to the stars was not technology or art or science, but simply this, the stubborn, illogical, absolutely human refusal to let anyone suffer alone. As they reached her residence and piled inside, filling the space with laughter and noise and life, Sarah sent up a silent prayer of thanks. Thanks for the chance to make a difference. Thanks for the courage to break rules when rules needed breaking. Thanks for the privilege of loving these extraordinary young people. The scarlet wasting had tried to take them. Fear had tried to isolate them. Logic had tried to write them off as acceptable losses. But love had saved them. One human doctor's love, expressed in the simplest possible gesture. A kiss on the forehead. A promise that they mattered. And in the end, that had made all the difference. 20 years after the plague, Dr. Sarah Morgan retired from active teaching. She was 65 years old. Her hair had gone silver, and her joints protested the long hours she had kept for decades. But her spirit remained as fierce as ever, and her commitment to compassionate care had not dimmed. On her final day at the academy, a ceremony was held in her honor. The auditorium was packed with former students, colleagues from across the galaxy, and of course, her family. The 47, now adults with careers and children of their own, sat in the front row. The Galactic Medical Council had commissioned a statue to be placed in the Academy courtyard. It depicted Sarah kneeling before a child, her hand gently placed on the child's forehead in that gesture that had become iconic across the galaxy. The child species was deliberately ambiguous, representing all species, all children, all vulnerable beings who needed care. At the base of the statue, an inscription read, "Love is medicine." Dr. Sarah Morgan, who taught the galaxy to care. Sarah stood before the veiled statue, surrounded by beings who represented a galactic community transformed by her example. Medical facilities across hundreds of worlds now included compassionate care protocols. Isolation wards required daily personal contact with patients. Medical students were taught that emotional support was as critical as physical treatment. The cultural shift Sarah had sparked had become permanent. When the statue was unveiled, Sarah felt her breath catch. The artist had captured something essential, not her face, which was rendered with skill but not the focus, but the expression of the child. Hope, trust, and relief were etched in those carved features. The child believed, truly believed, that they would be cared for. That was what mattered. That was what she had fought for all these years. Pip approached the podium, now a distinguished educator himself with silver creeping into his fur. He had been chosen to speak on behalf of all 47. 20 years ago, a human doctor walked into a quarantine ward and changed the galaxy. He began, his voice steady and clear. She was not the most famous doctor, not the most published researcher, not the most decorated physician, but she was the one who cared. When everyone else stepped back in fear, she stepped forward in love. When everyone else saw acceptable losses, she saw children who deserved dignity. When everyone else followed protocol, she followed her heart. He paused, emotion thickening his voice. She kissed us when we were untouchable. She held us when we were abandoned. She promised us we mattered when the galaxy had decided we did not. And because of that, we are standing here today. 47 children who should have died, who everyone expected to die, who were written off and forgotten. But we lived. We thrived. We became teachers and artists and doctors and scientists and parents. We became the future that Dr. Sarah fought for when no one else believed that future was possible. The auditorium was absolutely silent except for the sound of quiet crying from multiple species who processed emotion differently, but all understood grief and joy and gratitude. On behalf of all of us, Pip continued, and on behalf of the thousands of patients who have received better care because of the changes you inspired, on behalf of the medical students who will carry your lessons forward into the future, on behalf of every vulnerable being in the galaxy who will be treated with more compassion because you showed us a better way, thank you. Thank you for being brave when bravery was needed. Thank you for being kind when kindness seemed impossible. Thank you for being human in the best possible sense of the word. He stepped down from the podium and approached Sarah, tears streaming freely down his furry face. Then he did something that surprised her. He knelt down, making himself small as he had been as a sick child, and looked up at her with those same huge eyes that had first met hers through a quarantine barrier. Sarah understood immediately. She reached out and placed her hand gently on his forehead, then leaned down and kissed his brow with the same tender care she had shown 2 decades earlier. One by one, all 47 of her children came forward. Each knelt before her. Each received the same gesture of love. And each time, Sarah felt her heart break and heal simultaneously, overwhelmed by the privilege of having known them, having loved them, having been part of their impossible survival. When the last of them, Jax, now a renowned infectious disease specialist himself, received his kiss and stood, he turned to face the assembled crowd. Dr. Sarah taught us that medicine is not just about curing disease, he said. It is about honoring the inherent worth of every living being. It is about refusing to reduce people to statistics or acceptable losses. It is about choosing connection even when connection is dangerous. She taught us how to be truly human, regardless of what species we belong to. The ceremony concluded with a standing ovation that lasted for 10 full minutes. Sarah stood before her statue, surrounded by her children, and felt complete. She had devoted her life to caring for others, to fighting for the vulnerable, to insisting that love was not weakness but strength. And the galaxy had listened. That evening, Sarah sat in her garden surrounded by her family. Her children had brought their own children, and the space was filled with the chaos of multiple generations. Younglings of various species played together, supervised by parents who had once been plague victims themselves. Sarah watched a human child, Jax's daughter, playing chase with a Muradin youngling, Pip's son. Different species, different biologies, different worlds of origin, but they laughed the same way, played the same way, loved the same way. This was the future worth fighting for. Not genetic purity or species superiority, but genuine community across all boundaries. Connection, care, love. As the sun set over the academy grounds, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. She had lived a good life. She had made choices she was proud of. She had loved deeply and been loved in return. What more could anyone ask? Pip came to sit beside her, his own children playing nearby. "You know what I remember most clearly from those days in the quarantine ward?" he asked softly. "Tell me," Sarah replied. "How alone I felt before you came. Like I was already dead, already forgotten. Like my life had not mattered at all." Pip's eyes were distant, remembering. "And then you walked in and you saw me. Not the disease, not the inevitable death, but me. You learned my name. You asked about my favorite foods, my favorite games, what I wanted to be when I grew up. You treated me like I had a future worth caring about." Sarah took his hand, the same hand she had held when he was small and terrified. "You did have a future worth caring about. You all did. But we would not have reached that future without you," Pip said firmly. "That is what people need to understand. Compassion is not just nice or comforting. Sometimes compassion is literally the difference between life and death. Your refusal to abandon us, your insistence on physical contact despite the risk, that was not sentiment or emotion clouding your judgment. That was the clearest judgment possible. You saw what everyone else missed, that we were worth saving, and that saving us required love." Sarah smiled. "The galaxy has learned that lesson now. You do not need me to keep teaching it." "Maybe not," Pip agreed. "But we still need you to remind us. Every doctor who enters the field sees your statue. Every patient who receives care benefits from the protocols you fought for. Every child who is comforted by a physician's touch experiences the ripple effect of your courage. You may be retiring from teaching, but your lessons will continue long after we are all gone." "That is a beautiful thought," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "Thank you." As night fell and the stars emerged, brilliant against the dark sky, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. A young human doctor, fresh from Earth, assigned to the posting no one wanted. She could have refused, could have demanded a different assignment, could have kept herself safe and comfortable. Instead, she had walked into a quarantine ward and kissed the foreheads of dying children. One simple action, motivated by love and compassion, had changed the course of galactic history. It was not the advanced degree or the cutting-edge research or the prestigious position that defined her legacy. It was the choice to care when caring was dangerous. It was the decision to touch the untouchable. It was the stubborn human insistence that every life had value, regardless of the odds. Sarah Morgan had shown the galaxy what humanity could offer. Not superior technology or unique abilities, but a profound commitment to compassion that transcended logic and safety protocols. She had taught the universe that sometimes the most advanced medicine was also the most primitive, the healing power of human connection, the strength found in a simple kiss, the miracle of love offered without conditions or expectations. The plague orphans had survived because someone loved them, and in surviving, they had taught the galaxy how to love better, care deeper, reach further. They had become ambassadors of compassion, living proof that humanity's greatest contribution to the stars was not what humans could build or discover, but what humans could feel and share and inspire in others. As Sarah sat surrounded by the children she had saved and the grandchildren they had brought into the world, she reflected on what it meant to be human. Not the biological definitions or the cultural markers, but the essence of humanity at its best. The willingness to sacrifice safety for connection. The courage to love even when love was dangerous. The stubborn refusal to accept that any living being was disposable or unworthy of care. That was humanity. That was the gift Earth's children brought to the galaxy. And as the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, Sarah felt grateful beyond measure to have been part of that gift, to have shown the universe that sometimes the answer to impossible problems was not more technology or better protocols, but simply this: love, offered freely, given completely, changing everything. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.